Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you about two different types of electric bikes, throttle and pedal assist. And so we're here in Huntington Beach, California, and we have two different bikes here, one with a throttle and one with pedal assist. And I'm going to talk about some of the differences, test ride the bikes, and really try to give you a good feel for what those differences are and how that might apply to you personally. So this is a bike that actually we rented. It's a Pedego Classic Cruiser. There's a Pedego shop down here in Huntington Beach. I think it's just called Pedego Huntington Beach, and really nice guys over there. So we rented this bike, and yeah, this one just has a throttle, but they have it with pedal assist as well. So this is the throttle. Right now it's not on, so I can twist it and it's not going to do anything, similar to a moped or a scooter or motorcycle. But if I turn it on with this button here, now it's activated. This is showing your battery life, but you can actually twist the throttle. Now what I'll do is just kind of lift this wheel up a little bit, twist the throttle, and then get it going. So you can get an idea. That's how throttle works. Now pedal assist is a little bit different in that it just really amplifies your input. So you have to pedal the bike. Now this particular one has a motor in the center, but there's pedal assist bikes with the motor in the back or in the front. But basically inside the motor, there's sensors. Now there's a bunch of different motor systems out there and different sensors that work with those motor systems. This one in particular uses three different sensors. It uses a torque sensor, which basically senses how hard you're pedaling. It uses a cadence sensor, senses how fast you're pedaling. And then it uses another sensor just basically telling like how fast the bike's going overall. Now on the most rudimentary versions of pedal assist, they just use a cadence sensor. Some of the slightly better ones just use a torque sensor, but I guess you could say the best ones out there, from my experience, the ones that are going to provide the most predictable experience, are going to use three different sensors, as this one does. So before we get into riding the bikes, I want to talk a little bit about the history of how this technology began and talk a little bit about the differences in the ride experience between the two different systems. So in the early days of electric bikes, pretty much all you had was throttle, and that system, as I showed before, you just twist it and it goes. From there, they introduced what's called a cadence sensing pedal assist, and that system's just slightly different than a throttle, but it's almost like a throttle for your pedals, because all it did was basically you pedal the bike and it provides assistance. So all it did was sense that the pedals were moving. It wasn't really much more advanced than that. So the pedals would be moving and it would work just like a throttle. This particular bike doesn't have that system on it, but some of them do, even to this day. Mostly you'll find that on some of the less expensive bikes. The difficulty with the cadence sensing pedal assist system is it's not really that advanced. It doesn't have enough information to provide a really smooth and responsive experience. And you'll find this happens most when you're pedaling slowly. Even if you're in a high gear, you're pushing hard on the pedals, but because the pedals are not moving quickly and it's not sensing your torque, it's not going to provide a lot of power. But on the other side, if you're pedaling fast in a low gear, you might not really be putting much into the bike, but the bike's going to provide a lot of power. So from that cadence sensing pedal assist, the bike manufacturers or the motor system manufacturers were thinking, how can we make this better? And they introduced what's called torque sensing pedal assist. And with that system, it's sensing more proportionally what you're putting into the bike. So it's sensing how actually hard you're pedaling as opposed to just how fast you're pedaling, because that's more realistic of how much power that you're putting into it. So it's easier for the bike to match that. So this bike has the torque sensing and cadence. So with the torque sensing, if you're starting off from a line and you're pushing hard on the pedal, it's going to provide a lot of assistance, even if you're not pedaling that fast, because it senses that you really need it. Or in another situation, you're going up a hill and it senses that you're pushing pretty hard on the pedals. It's going to provide more assistance. Now with that, coupled with the cadence sensor, it's able to more realistically understand exactly what's going on, how fast you're pedaling, how hard are you pedaling, and try to get an understanding of how much power the bike actually needs to deliver. So integrating all these sensors together really provides a very predictable experience. And from my experience, that really improves the safety because you know exactly what you're going to get out of the bike. You don't really have to think about it too much. You know, if you're starting out at the light, if you put your foot on the pedal, it doesn't really give you power until you actually want it, until you actually push on the pedal a little bit more, not just rest your foot on it or things like that. Or maybe more so when you're pedaling, you just don't really have to think about it. The way I always describe it is you just kind of feel stronger than you are. And I really like that experience. Now, there's a lot of like philosophical debates on what's better or what a bike should have or shouldn't have and where the bike can be used. But I guess really what I wanted to talk about more is what that experience is and then how that might apply to you. I mean, from my experience, I really like pedal assist because you always have to pedal. You're always active in this process of riding the bike. I know for myself personally, if I have a throttle, I tend to use it and I tend not to really pedal. Now, some people might be in a situation where they need to have a throttle, and I totally get that. I think that there's a lot of people that might think that they need a throttle because they don't really understand how well good pedal assist actually works. And I wanted to show a little bit more about that, but I also just wanted to explain that when you're in a high level of assistance, you really don't need to pedal much. I mean, on the highest level of assistance, most of these bikes are providing over 300% of what you put into it. So you can think of it in these terms that you're taking one pedal stroke and the bike is putting about 3 times on top of that. So if you think of it in those terms, it's pretty dramatic. You really don't have to work hard to get a lot out of the bike. Before we take these bikes for a ride, I wanted to talk about the 3 classes of electric bikes. There's class 1, which is 20 miles an hour, pedal assist only. Now, these bikes you'll be able to ride in most places you can ride a bicycle. There's very little restrictions on them. Then there's class 2, which is throttle activated, 20 miles an hour. Now, there are some places that you might not be able to ride a class 2 bike, like mountain bike trails and stuff like that. And then there's the class 3 bike. Now, this is the bike that I use the most because I tend to use my bike for a car replacement. And this is a 28 mile an hour pedal assist. So this is going to be the fastest type of electric bike that's legally classified, at least in California and most other states in the US. This one happens to be a class 3 bike that we have here today. And the Pedigo that we have is a class 2. I want to start the ride today with the throttle activated bike, the class 2, 20 miles an hour, throttle activated. Now, I just want to mention, because we don't actually sell any throttle activated bikes in our shop, it's not that in any way I think that they're bad or that you shouldn't buy one. It's just not something that we do. We primarily work with Bosch. We primarily work with these like real premium electric bikes, and we haven't found too many premium electric bikes out there that actually offer a throttle, because quite frankly, I'd love to have some options for some people that have some more physical limitations or might actually need a throttle. But again, like I said, most people that think that they actually need a throttle might not. So think about that one. I think this is actually a pretty good application for this bike and these type of paths. Like you just kind of like cruising, want to take it easy. This bike's kind of just like sitting on a big couch and just rolling down the road and enjoying the scenery. So, I mean, I really can't hate on that. I think that's a good time. So if you see, I can actually just twist the throttle. I don't have to pedal at all. And I'll try not to, I'm gonna loop around here. All right. So just twisting the throttle and going. All right. So as you saw, like I really didn't have to work too much. I mean, pretty much don't have to work at all. If you want, you can just sit on here, twist the throttle and go, and it's going to give you plenty of power. So that's the system, and it's pretty simple. I mean, I do find that with these, like pedaling with it or like trying to manage the power is not always so easy. So a lot of times people find that you kind of have to regulate the power more yourself, but like with the more advanced pedal assist system, you don't really have to think about it too much. So next we're going to test out the supercharger. This one is pedal assist class 3, so 28 miles an hour, pretty powerful motor. But again, actually a little point on that. So this motor, it says that it's 250 watts, and that motor says that it's 500 watts, but actually the experience riding them, this is definitely not half as much power. It's really about how the power is delivered. So that's another discussion we'll probably get into another time, but I think of the wattage almost like the fuel mileage on your car. It's not necessarily something to boast about, that like, oh yeah, I get 10 miles to a gallon and you get 30. That doesn't necessarily mean that one has more power than the other. So what I generally look at more so is the torque rating. This one has a pretty high one. But let's take it for a spin. So I'm just going to turn this on. Now again, this system is a little bit more advanced, so there's more controls to it. So that's also something that sometimes people maybe might feel like they like one more than the other just because they want something as simple as possible. This is a little bit more complex. You have different levels of pedal assist. This particular one has 4 different levels. At the lowest level, it's about 60%, and in this one, actually, the top level is 340%. One other thing I should note is because the motor is in the center, you really have to shift the gears. This particular bike has gears that are inside the hub, but it will also work with the standard traditional derailleur with the gears on the outside. Well, let's take it for a spin. So this one has 14 speeds, and we're going to start out in gear number 5. And this has an electronic shifter, so I can shift through the gears pretty quickly. So if I just pedal, so if I just kind of take one stroke of the pedal, you can see I actually get pretty good amount of assistance. I'll move it up to slightly higher gear. But really the idea is that I pedal and it's just amplifying my pedal. It doesn't charge when I'm pedaling. It does require me to pedal at all times, but it doesn't, like right now I'm putting in very minimal effort, but I'm getting a good amount of power out of the bike. And as I get the pedals going, it really gets going. One of the comments that comes up in the shop quite a bit about throttle bikes is, I want to throttle because I want to have an easy time getting through an intersection or starting out from a stop. And sure, that might be true, but I feel like a proper pedal assist bike is really going to give you a pretty easy time as well. And I wanted to be able to show that today. So what I'm going to do is actually, we're going to measure between these 2 poles. It's not going to be super scientific. I'm just going to walk this and give a good idea of what this distance is. And then we'll film in time the 2 bikes riding through this path here. So I realized that was not the most scientific measuring, but I got 109 of my feet. So I would say it's about 109 feet. My shoe size is 11, so I think it's about 12 inches, somewhere in that area. But I think this might be helpful for those that want to have that data. So let's give it a go. Well, that was fun. I think it was kind of helpful for me because actually I don't really ride throttle bikes all that much, and people always bring that topic up about, yeah, it's so much easier to get through an intersection, and certainly you can get through maybe with a little bit less effort, but I try to keep the effort pretty similar between the 2 bikes. I did pedal the Pedigo bike while I was also obviously pedaling the supercharger. One thing to note is that with the center drive motor, you do have to shift through the gears a little bit more, and the roll-off hub, you do have to kind of get in that groove some more. But both of them seem to be right around 7 seconds. You'll be able to see exactly the time in the video. Well, I hope you guys found this video to be helpful, and I hope that it helps explain the differences between these two systems, because it's really not super simple, but I try to make it as simple as possible. If you have any further questions about pedal assist or throttle or really electric bikes in general, just leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. And I'll see you soon.